Age-restricted community must allow disabled child issue. A buyer wants to purchase a home in an age-restricted community. The buyer has a disabled child who must live with the buyer to receive proper care and treatment. Can an age-restricted community prohibit the purchase of a home by a buyer with a disabled child? Answer: probably not. In general, age-restricted communities are exempt from the fair housing laws prohibiting discrimination against families with children. This exemption does not apply, however, to a person with a disability. The Arizona Court of Appeals has ruled that the refusal of a homeowners association to waive the age restriction to allow an underage disabled person to reside with his parents violated the reasonable accommodation requirements of the fair housing laws. Kennedy v. Prescott Canyon Estates Homeowners Association, 204 Arizona 91, 60 P. 3, 231, Appert 2002. Arizona Realtor R. Digest. September 2007. Apartment complex must reserve parking for mobility-impaired tenant. Facts. A mobility-impaired tenant has issued a demand for a reserved parking space near her apartment, despite the fact that the complex offers ample unassigned parking and does not have any parking spaces marked as reserved. Issue. Must the apartment complex grant the tenant a reserved parking space? Answer. Yes. Pursuant to fair housing regulations, a landlord must make reasonable accommodations in rules, policies, practices, or services if necessary for the disabled person to use the housing. Arizona Realtor R. Magazine, June 2012. Atheists are entitled to the religious protection under fair housing laws. Issue. The seller is a deeply religious individual and does not want to sell his home to someone who is not religious. Specifically, the seller wants the listing broker to advertise that the home will not be sold to atheists. Do the fair housing laws protect atheists in the sale of homes? Answer. Yes. Although atheists are not formally religious, atheists as an irreligion are entitled to the protection of the fair housing laws. Board of Educ of Kiryas Joel Village School Dist. V. Grumet, 512 U.S. 687, 114 S-T, 2481, U.S.N.Y., 1994. Therefore, the listing broker cannot advertise that the home will not be sold to atheists. Arizona Realtor R. Digest, November 2007. Disclosure requirements of a group home depend on specific circumstances. Issue. Is a real estate licensee representing a seller in the listing of the seller's residence required to disclose to a buyer the presence of a home care facility for troubled teenagers in the neighborhood? Answer. Under the Federal Fair Housing Act, the Act, as amended in 1988, no person shall discriminate against a person with a disability or handicap in connection with the sale or rental of a dwelling. Under the Act, handicap means 1. A mental or physical impairment that substantially limits at least one major life activity, or 2. A record of such impairment, or 3. Being regarded as having such an impairment. See 42 U.S.C., paraf 3602H. In this instance, the teenagers are described as troubled. Likely, a troubled teenager does not constitute a handicapped or disabled person under the Act. As such, the seller or the seller's agent would be required to disclose this home care facility. However, if the teenagers are found to suffer from a disability, the Act would prohibit the seller or the seller's agent from disclosing. These situations are fact-specific. A broker should consult with counsel about the specific situation before taking action. Arizona Realtor Magazine, May 2014. Fair Housing. Fair housing law protects national origin. Facts. A real estate licensee wishes to represent the seller in the sale of his house. However, during the listing presentation, the seller states he does not want to sell his house to anyone that is not a United States citizen. Issue. Can the licensee list the property for sale? Answer. Probably not. 42 U.S. Code, paragraph 3604 states it shall be unlawful. A. To refuse to negotiate for the sale of or otherwise deny a dwelling to any person because of national origin. The seller's request is a violation of the Fair Housing Act, and the licensee would be exposed to civil liability and sanctions against his license if he participates in the seller's request. The licensee should notify the seller that he is not interested in taking the listing, as it would violate the Fair Housing Act.